So to make our sugar-free Snickers, we're going to start with the caramel, and if you don't have a good caramel flavoring, you're going to need a little bit of molasses, a tiny drop of coffee flavoring, and a little bit of imitation almond extract. And I find that these altogether, they don't taste like coffee, they don't taste like almond, but they give it a bit of that sweet flavor that you can really only get from caramel. So you mix that together with your cream and your salt and you set that aside. And then we're gonna melt down and heat up our isomalt and our maltitol syrup. And you want to get it just to where everything is perfectly melted. Don't go much farther than that unless you've added water, in which case you want to get rid of all the water. So heat it up to just about a little past 100 degrees Celsius. So once you've got that melted down past 100 degrees C, you're going to want to add in your cream and the flavorings, and it's going to bubble up and steam a lot right when you add it in. So stand back at first and then start whisking it. Now the molasses gives it that nice dark caramel color that you otherwise would need to get with some kind of food coloring. Next, add in your butter and whisk that around until it melts. Now it should be about this consistency when you spread it on something cool and thin, like a countertop or a metal knife. And I tried this with different sweeteners, erythritol and xylitol, and they both came out like this, really grainy. They didn't stay emulsified together, so you really do need to use isomalt, maltitol, or a mix of the two. So next, add in your roasted peanuts and mix that around. And you want to work quickly while this is still hot, because as it cools down, it'll get really thick. Next, add it into your molds. I'd recommend using squishy silicone molds because it's much easier to remove later. Then you want to add butter to the back of some kind of spoon or utensil and use that to just squish down your caramel so it's in a nice flat layer. And all the recipe quantities and instructions for this are written out on the TPH website, and I'll put a link to that down below. Now it's really hard to clean caramel or any kind of sugar sweetener that's hardened onto a pan, so you just add a little bit of water back, put a lid on it, and re-boil it, and just all that steam will run along the sides and help you loosen up all the hardened sweetener. So next, get your egg whites ready, add a little bit of cream of tartar, and whip them up to stiff peaks. And this is for making the nougat, so we're going to need the same amount of that sweetener again. This is what happens if you overcook the sweetener. It actually turns a little dark. It doesn't taste good like caramel. It has a little bit of a more burnt flavor to it, and it's not as sweet tasting. But you can use the excess for making some cool sugar decorations. So this time I took the sweetener off the stove right as it hit 100 degrees C and poured that into my whipped egg whites while the mixer was running. And then you're going to add in your peanut butter and mix it around. And it should be this consistency while it's warm, but then it should thicken up but when it cools. So put that into a piping bag so it's easier to get into our molds, or you can just use a Ziploc bag like I did. Now we're going to do the same thing we did before, but we're going to use our fingers instead. So use some kind of oil or butter or something so that the nougat doesn't stick to you, and just squish down the nougat so it's nice and flat and even. And then we're going to put that into the fridge or freezer to set up. This is Little Sesame. He's the newest TPH family member, and the little lazy bum was watching TV the whole time I was making this recipe. So next you're gonna melt down your chocolate, and I've got instructions on the TPH website for how to temper chocolate if you're using real chocolate with cocoa butter in it. If you're using compound chocolate or just some kind of chocolate sauce instead, or magic shell, you don't need to temper it, you can just melt it down. So get a nice even coating of that over your chilled Snickers, and then shake it for a little bit to smooth out the chocolate and get it down all the sides. If you have any questions about low-carb baking or the sweeteners I used in this recipe, feel free to ask me about them below and I'll do my best to answer.